but it's more of a discussion in the sense
Right.
that our last episode we talked about advice being taken as hostility, and this links back to today's episode in the sense that a lot of people take advice in a hostile way, and we talked about seeing the packaging as less important than the actual content and seeing the
Right.
content as more important than the carrier. I guess that's the phrase we
Right.
use. So
Right.
my question for you is, what do you think is a way for people to start seeing that content as more important than the carrier? Because as we've seen in the past, we're seeing an increase of people being upset about advice because it's not coming in the way that they need it to come. They'd like it to come in. And why do you think, especially, just to give me a short answer, do you think that we're so entrapped in this box of containers rather than content and
I love
character rather and creation of false stories rather than the actual character of what's being said?
Yeah, I think so. So the question need to be answered in two parts, and I would like us to start off with a kind of an analogy here because it's a very complex, important question, but it's complex. So growing up in a world, so you see, in the 1980s and 1960s, well, I was born in the late 1970s, 1978. So we grew up in the 80s and a part of the 90s, and so transition to adulthood in the 2000s. And by the time we're transitioning, we have already been molded with values, principles, respect for elders, listening, getting information, trusting people who offer value and showed that at least they needed to be trusted. And so we would listen to them and focus on the content, not on the container. Then when we transitioned to the 2000s, graduating at the university and now getting to masters and PhDs, the social media or the Gen Z generation had started, so to speak. And therefore, or the Android generation and the iPhone generation had started. And at that time, everybody now was an expert. And then the 2000s graduated to 2010 and 2015, and now in 2020, everybody now became an expert. And therefore, that expertise was never really on anything that most of them knew. Don't get me wrong, a lot of people knew what they do, and you can find a track record. It's not just to have a phone, a WhatsApp with a blue app or Facebook or TikTok or Instagram, and then you start writing anything there and claim you're an expert. So I know why I'm going through this winded way. And therefore, the attitude changed in the 2000s now to 2020, which was that when you want to be heard, especially most people, you lock in light on your camera and start gaslighting and crying on air so that at least, or talking negativity and spurring innuendos on others so that you can be heard. And then people started listening. And in that case, it was not content. So it's more about trying to be important or feel important. And then people are looking more at the container rather than the content. And therefore, when now you come with content that is important, people do not see it as anything unless it is harsh, unrealistic, and somehow have innuendos that are being spurred. So to answer your question, what I notice is that one have to be consistent and persistent in speaking right. As they say, you can still stand out and guide as many people as possible who can then become messiahs and actually advocates of positive messaging and why content is more important than the container. And so if somebody speaks sense, if somebody is guiding you, you must not like the person. That is the container. You should like what he or she is saying. That's the content. And therefore, moving forward, if anyone who listens to someone, that person is speaking negativity, run away. If you're speaking positivity, try also to understand where is he coming from and what has he done. Always look at the track record of people, the track record of anyone. Go to LinkedIn, because somebody cannot be speaking about a topic that he tells you that he only watch on social media and understand. Go and find out what he or she have contributed to society. Once you look at that, then you start to know that the content from that person is worth it. And then the container content analogy is so important, so much so that sometimes parents give advice to their kids out of good faith. But because they are talking, the way they talk the kids focus more on the way they talk, or it was harsh, it was this, rather than the content, and then they lose out the message. Teachers suffer through the same thing. So overarchingly, let's focus more on content, but good content, because there is a lot of 99% of content spur on social media, most of the time do not carry value, but they carry innuendos and vindictiveness and satire or saga, so to speak.
Great work, and I think that you said that in a way with a lot of finesse, and your little analogy of a timeline was also very educative. So yeah, and obviously the people agree because they're agreeing and saying that it's very educative.